Hey folks, this is Mr. Nick Roth, your Women's Wellness Connection Data Coordinator for Clinical Services and CCGP. In this short video, we're going to be talking about how to run through your data cleanup project sheet. So in front of us, we have an example sheet, and the first thing we're going to talk about is how you navigate from your sheet. Say we wanted to look up this individual case for this client ID, this screening, and this is the error we're going to look at to see 60 days between the first abnormal finding and the final diagnosis. There are two ways that you can get to this screening in order to review this case. The first way we're going to demonstrate is that you can copy this screening ID, and once you are logged into eCast in Google Chrome, you can copy and paste this ID into the upper right search table, which is either getting a client ID or a screening. So you copy that screening ID in and hit Get Screening. That'll then navigate you directly to the screening that we're asking you to review. In this instance, it would be the breast screening for this client. The second way that you can navigate to this individual screening is by going over to this column at the very end of your sheet. So we're working on the first one here. If we copy and paste this URL website, you can then put that into Google Chrome, hit enter while you're logged into eCast, and it will take you directly to the screening as well. So you can either copy and paste that screening ID number into the screening search, or you can copy and paste this link directly into your Google Chrome browser, hit enter, and so long as you are logged into eCast before you do either one of those, it'll take you directly to the screening we're asking you to review. Now, in regard to these individual errors, these top two are going to be the most common ones you see in your sheet. It either took longer than 60 days between the first abnormal and the final diagnosis, or this individual is marked as lost to follow-up, refused, or we've got all we need in there, we're just looking for a final diagnosis to be put in. Say the second highest rate one you're going to see is the treatment start date available, and we're going to walk through each one of these instances as this represents pretty much everything you're going to see, or what we're going to throw at you in the data cleanup sheet. So this first one took more than 60 days between the first abnormal and final diagnosis. So what we're going to ask you to do is to go into this screening ID and take a look at when they first had an abnormal finding and then what the final diagnosis date is. So we'll go over to Google Chrome, and once we have copied and pasted that URL into the Google Chrome browser and hit return, we bring up the screening, and here we have it. What we're looking at is this suspicious CBE finding is on September 2nd, and then we're going to look for our final diagnosis date. In the final diagnosis screen, you click on that pencil, it'll bring up your final diagnosis data entry piece over here, and this is the date we're looking for, so 1/12/2016, which matches the most recent procedure performed. So your final diagnosis date is always the date of the last diagnostic procedure that you have in here for the client. In this instance, it's a legitimate find. We had a lot of diagnostic procedures occur. So what we would do back in our sheet is we would mark this as data is accurate, meaning this is an accurate piece of data that we're not going to change. There's nothing for us to fix. It's accurate, and it's just still not meeting that indicator. Now, if you went into that screening and looked at all of these procedures and realized that, well, you had a scheduled wait, and maybe this should have been closed out first, and then the final diagnosis would be short-term follow-up, and they should have come in later. Let's say that that 1/12/2016 date was actually something 3 months down the road, where clinically you said, we're going to ask you to come back in a set amount of time and get a diagnostic procedure. That's where we would break this case in between two different ones. We would take this procedure and put it on its own short-term follow-up case, and then we would take this screening that's in front of us and close it out as the individual coming in for short-term follow-up in 3 months. Now, confusing, right? So when we go back to our sheet, if you're looking at one of these 60 days first abnormal and you realize that you have a scheduled wait between the two, or between the very last diagnostic and the ones prior, and you think it potentially could be a screening and diagnostic that closed out a short-term follow-up, and then a second short-term follow-up. Again, what we're looking for there for the short-term follow-up is a scheduled wait, where an individual came in and then you said, hey, we're going to bring you back in 3 months or 6 months, and we're going to redo a diagnostic procedure or do a diagnostic procedure and see where you're at then. That's an instance where you might want to hit another option on this, which is need help from CDPHE, and you can write in need short-term follow-up added would do it. So when you submit the sheet to me, that's the indicator that I'm going to go in and take a look at it and help you out with switching between those two short-term follow-ups and the original screening and diagnostic. So that's the 60-day rule. Really what we're asking you to do is confirm that there was a longer wait than 60 days between that first abnormal finding and the final diagnosis date. Now, the second most common one you're going to look at is this loss to follow-up, refused, or DX pending. So if we take the screening ID, and actually we're just going to take the URL, we're going to copy and paste this into Google Chrome, and we'll see that we have a loss to follow-up case to review. So what we're asking you to do in these instances where we have loss to follow-up is to go in your chart and see if the client actually came back in for those diagnostic workups that you were telling them that they needed. So if you look and you realize that you have further diagnostic information to put in, you can change this follow-up to further immediate, and then from there you'd be able to add the diagnostics as well as the final diagnosis after that. So if you were able to add a diagnostic and then add a final diagnosis for that client, the way you would mark your sheet is data updated, now meeting indicator. Now if you go in and you look at that loss to follow-up and you realize there's still loss to follow-up, they didn't ever come back in, you would mark it as data is accurate, still not meeting indicator. Now this next one is for those folks that have had a diagnosis, that when we initially diagnose folks in ECAST, where you put in their final diagnostic procedure and what the diagnosis was, that we mark them as treatment pending, and what we ask is that you go back in and review these cases to see if you have a treatment start date available. I'll go into the case and show you what that looks like. So we navigate into that individual screening, and this is what we're looking for down here. It's the final diagnosis, and we have treatment needed. Diagnostic workup is complete, the diagnosis of cancer. So what you want to do is click into that client's final diagnosis, and if you do have a treatment start date, they've come back in and they've started treatment, that's where you can change this to treatment started, and then we'd ask you to put that treatment started date in this field right here. So if you find that you have a treatment started date for the individual, I can show you how you'd mark the sheet. We would ask that you say that the data was updated and that it's now meeting the indicator. But let's say you went in and you realized that you don't have a record that the client has come in for any treatment. That's when you would mark this as data is accurate and still not meeting the benchmark. One other note, we do ask that when you say that the data is updated and it's now accurate, that you just go ahead and put that treatment started date in this particular column. Just put it in the comments, so just in case I need to go in and put it in myself, we do have that from time to time. So I have a record of the treatment start date that you did put in here. Let's say it was 10/25/2016. And I'll know in reading what the detail is for this, what the intention is for this date. So just a little note on when you do actually have a treatment start date that we throw it into the data cleanup sheet, please. Now this next error, in particular that we're going to talk about, because we have the loss to follow-up for this individual, we have this abnormal CBEs, may not be closed out without additional diagnostics unless approved by the WWC nurse consultant. So let's go into that screening and take a look at what that looks like. So we have two things going on here. One is that the individual had a suspicious finding and they haven't been back in for any diagnostic workup. So this is one of those instances where you would need to contact the nurse consultant, who would be currently our acting nursing consultant who's helping us in the meantime is Angie, whom you're all familiar with. So you would contact her about this individual case. If you realize that you did that, you can go ahead and shoot an email my way, and if you realize that you just need to put the email in and let us know, you can then mark your sheet to say need help from CDPHE to correct. That gives me the indicator that we need to touch base with our nurse consultant to make sure that we have proper documentation on that. If you find that you didn't ask for documentation for this, that we do have a suspicious CBE in there that was not addressed or wasn't sent along to the nurse consultant, or the individual didn't come back in for any of the other screenings, because we do also have them as lost to follow-up, you would mark it as data is accurate and still not meeting benchmark, and you would do the same for this particular instance. So, case incomplete. This is another one where we're going to go and take a look at the screening by copying and pasting. So in this particular screening, we have a couple of things going on. One, we have a duplicate procedure entered as both a diagnostic as well as a screening on the same date. Or so would it appear. What we really have is two instances where we did a mammogram, one where we have an unknown finding for the first one, and one where we have a BI-RADS 0. So this one's pretty complicated. It's a little messy. Now in this instance, what we would ask you to do is to simply put one mammogram in with whatever the finding was for that one. So you'd have to delete this one out and then add the procedure results for this one that's marked as unknown. And then because we have a BI-RADS 0 finding in here, it means that we need additional imaging. So this one is still in need of further diagnostics. So what we're asking you to do is look in the client's record and see if they've come in for any further diagnostic treatment, and if so, to add that data into ECAST. So if they did have further diagnostics, you would add that information in plus a final diagnosis, and then we can mark the sheet as two things here. One being data is now accurate, or sorry, data has been updated and now meeting the indicator for both of these. If the client didn't come in, you would mark it as data is accurate, meaning they're still lost to follow-up, refused, or that diagnostic part is still pending. Now if you went in there and you looked at that and you saw the two mammograms and you thought, what is going on here? I need a little assistance with this. You can mark it as need help from CDPHE to correct. And then please email me. I'll give my contact information here at the end of the video. But at any time when you're working in the data cleanup project, feel free to email or call me, and I'll put that information up here at the end of the video. It's also going to be in the newsletter. It's going to be in the email that you receive with all of the data cleanup sheet information, but we'll post it here in the video as well. So the last two items that we're going to look at are this more than one colposcopy and then a final diagnosis date, which should be matching the date of last procedure. So let's go into this individual case. What we're asking you to do here is to confirm that both of these colpos are accurate as far as data entry is concerned. So if you have more than one in here, we're asking that you confirm that two actually did occur in the system. Again, if you realize that you have one in there in error, you could remove the erroneous colpo and then put data updated, or if you have two in there and that's how it should be, you can put data as accurate. If you're uncertain about what to do, you can mark it as need help from CDPHE, and I'll get a hold of, and then I'll take a look and get a hold of you and ask questions about this, but you can always email me or call me. Now the last one that we're going to talk about is this final diagnosis date matching the date of the last procedure. So let's take a look at that case. So in this instance, when you're looking at the final diagnosis, we ask that you go to this little pencil to the left of final diagnosis, click it, and we're going to look at the final diagnosis date. And then we're going to look at the date of the last diagnostic procedure, which is the BI-RADS 2 finding on this ultrasound. So what you would do is change this date to match this date of 1/5/2017, and then hit update. Now when you do that and you make it so that the final diagnosis date and the diagnostic last date of the final diagnostic are the same, then you can navigate into the sheet and mark that data is updated in ECAST and now meeting the benchmark. If you have any questions on anything regarding the data cleanup project for the WWC Clinical Services or CCGP, please use these two contacts to get a hold of me. We'll also be doing some live webinar work, which will be in the email that you receive. But if at any point you're looking at a case and you're wondering, what do I do here? Just go ahead and either shoot me an email or give me a phone call, and I'll help you out. So thank you for listening to the training, and good luck everybody with your sheets.